our families, our health. Please guide us and direct us and lead our footsteps in the decisions we have to make. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Welcome, everybody. Today's a big day for us. I do want to say to preface the meeting that all of us are here for the same reason. How we get there, we may not all agree on, but at some point we'll get as close as we can. We'll salute and we'll move out smart. So at this point, Mr. Clark.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Pascal, Mr. Jones, Mr. Wood, Mr. Treadway, Mr. Pettis, Mr. Hassel, Mr. McClammy. I'm sorry, Ms. McClammy. Mr. Gidley, Mr. Harrison, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Starnes, Mr. Hendricks. Mr. Chair, you have four.
All right. First bill is going to be SB 67 Jones. I'm going to ask the vice chair today to help me with that bill. Go ahead with that.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, as you recall, 2 weeks ago, we had a public hearing on this bill. I just want to take a few minutes and take us from the public hearing to how we got here with Senate Bill 67 in growth rate. First, I want to applaud our audience, the veteran service organizations in our state, and the other veterans throughout the state that have, over the last 3 weeks, have provided input, written input to the senator upstairs. And so the engrossed version of the bill is shifted. It remains, the current posture of the bill, it remains that the commissioner will be a cabinet member, will be a government cabinet. We did not change that. They did not change it upstairs. What they changed was the construction of the board members. Many of the veterans organizations and veterans throughout the state had a certain initial version of the bill, and several of the VSOs, the American Legion, VFW, they actually got written solutions, and every proposal was included in the Senate Bill 67. So the board configuration remains the same as written in law, and so we continue to dialogue with different groups throughout the state. And so I do want to applaud our veterans that have came in this building and gave us input. It makes our job easier when they do that. So I want to encourage our veterans to continue to do that. You know? So with that, with Mr. Chairman, I do want to highlight the board role shifting from a decision role to a oversight. And also with the Veterans Assistance Fund, which has a couple $100 million in that fund. So the VSO, Veterans Service Organization Board, they ask that they maintain direct control over that. And so that's also included in the bill. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll entertain any questions the members may have.
I have a question. So this bill is backed by the big three VSOs, correct? American Legion, VAV, and VFW.
And the NVET, and the MVETs, American Veterans, they actually was included in the press release sent out from the government's office yesterday. So we have the fourth veteran service group. But just to be transparent with that, there are pockets of veterans throughout the state, you know, that do not agree with that. And our role with trying to make Senate Bill 67 the best as it can be is get input from everyone. And so those three organizations you mentioned, they pretty much, you could say they're the founding organizations of the state board after World War II. And so we will continue to ask input from our veterans community, knowing that that's the only way to make the bill better. Continue to input from our veterans community.
So just to follow up on that, I apologize, I missed the public hearing because I had another bill in another committee. So my understanding before big groups have signed off on the bill, had input in the bill, and the $220 million fund is controlled by the vets.
And once that's input from those organizations, and once again, just maintaining the continued communication, transparency. We had several groups that came in yesterday, and myself and the chairman, we continue to dialogue, and we will continue to do that. You know, it's a process. But I do want to encourage our veterans to continue the process and then to make this bill as the best as it can, because speaking of American Legion, I'm the past commander from the American Legion in Pelican, the chartered member. So both of us are retired military, so we're not going to do anything that's going to harm our veterans. But one thing we do, we want to continue a dialogue and input from everyone in the state.
Good morning. With that commissioner being chosen by the first time, I wasn't sure, would that be a veteran or at someone
Yes.
that would be picked for that position? And I didn't see a salary range at the discretion. So what would that salary be?
Okay, you're correct. And being a member of the governor's cabinet, they'll be set by the governor for salary. And as far as your question regarding does the bill specify this person have to be a veteran? Yes, I know. I think I saw some social media outlets that are saying that anyone off the street can be appointed. But no, existing law still states that you have to be a veteran. That's unchanged.
And that's my main concern, for y'all, to make sure that we have someone that is in the military, that is a veteran, because if you're not, how can you tell someone else how to operate? You don't know better than we do. And so I want to make sure that that is there. But also I have a question for my constituents about the oversight committee. What exactly is this? Advisory board now, oversight committee, and what does that entail? I mean, we just use one, so I need to know what are those definitions, how much power, discretion they have as a board.
Well, the input from once again, the veterans, we have particular veterans, VSOs. The initial format of the bill is written as advisory role. Input from the VSOs, they want to change that to oversight. You see on the first page, and some people have asked what's the difference between advisory and oversight. Advisory role is exactly what it says. You advise, make recommendations, and so forth. Whereas oversight, it takes it includes that, but it takes it to another level to include towards enforcement of compliance. Whether it's doing audits and so forth. VSO, they want to make sure that word what change from advisory to oversight. As you see in the bill, that it crosses out other areas of the bill from the board to advisory. That is talking about day-to-day operations. And what I shared with several other people that met with our VSO's conversation was day-to-day operations. We won't be able to do that at the commission. That's the currently how it's day-to-day operation is the current commission. So at least that's a change. And so go back to your question.
What's oversight?
Right, oversight is
And I've asked, man, we talked before now, sorry.
right. So oversight includes being an advisory role, and plus you have the ability, the role is to enforcement and compliance. That's what you're looking at. Enforcement and compliance. If there's policies in place, instead of saying advise recommendations to that, your role is okay. Now let's look at make sure it's being compliance and enforcement. Then if there's not, if we have a mechanism to once again the VSOs, they were okay with that.
And I've heard you say before, we were talking, as we're talking through something else, about the funding, finances, that the advisory oversight committee will have. Can you put that down with it?
But currently, there's a fund called the Veterans Assistance Fund, and there's a mechanism to feed the funds that fund. A large amount of money, over $200,000 is in that. So initially, with the initial bill, where it was structured, millions, a couple of millions, that's a lot of money. And actually, there's no other department in the state that's structured that would have access or control of that. And so the budget actually comes from that fund. Looking at maybe probably $100 million will be included in the budget, but still that board will have say so as far as, this budget, the money coming out of that funding to support the operating budget. So I think that's one reason the BSO is we wanna make sure is, we understand, you cannot have a competing role with the commissioner and the board and have both having decision-making authority. We cannot have it competing, but we wanna have input because we're the founders of this board. We want to have some type of management in that. So what's gonna be okay with that? I understand there may be pockets of veterans out there, maybe have a problem with that, but we're gonna continue. I cannot stress this enough. We can't control what takes place or what took place in the Senate. But here, hopefully every veteran is sitting in this room and listening can say that. We open our doors from day one, and our doors with the team open was communication.
I appreciate you all listening to our veterans. And afterwards, that you took the time to go to the governor's office. That's how government should work. And so I commend this committee for listening, hearing their heartfelt thoughts that they're speaking to us, and then taking a step further by going to the governor's office several times and working with them. Because it's very important that, like I said, I'm not military, and I know you are, but we're making decisions on somebody else's life, we're making decisions, and so I appreciate you for that. So I want to say thank you for listening.
And for the people in the audience, just know, whatever the will of this committee is today, whether we vote it out or this week, next week, our doors is open. I can't stress that enough. Because it's been 3 years, I've been trying to get veterans come inside this building. And I think many have taken advantage of that and built relationships, lifetime relationships. Just want to thank everyone for that.
I just want to say, I kind of want to get back on when she said, the committee work. I mean, you guys did a good job. I think that you came to a common ground with this from the beginning, what it was in the Senate. I really appreciate, like you said, that's how it should work. And I think talking to a lot of the members from the organizations, they got some things they did. Might not got everything, but it's always a common ground. So in the appropriate time, I would love, to bring this bill for page before.
I want to look at too. In dealing with this, and of course, I'm like Representative McClain here. I did not come from a military background. You guys do. Many out here do, and there is no greater entity in our realm of humanity than those that serve our country. 400,000, if I'm correct, in Alabama that serve our country, that we would not be sitting here at this table today. And so many of them gone to battle, some of them served at peacetime, or whatever their role was. And this has been a real difficult situation for me. Not because of any group on either side. My very good friend is the senator that brought this bill, okay? He's my senator. That's irrelevant. What is relevant is making sure, as Representative McClain said, that whatever we do in mind of those 400,000 people that serve our state and have served our nation. That's the most important thing. I am glad that we took some time to work through some things. I don't think that probably this here yet is perfect, okay, at all. I still have some concerns, I really do. But nevertheless, the number one thing, and Chairman Oliver and I talked about this yesterday, that the number one thing has to be what is best for our veterans. I think one of the things that I heard at the public hearing a couple of weeks ago is not necessarily that most of our veterans didn't want some change, didn't want something done differently. I think it was the fact that they wanted to have a voice and somebody to have an ear. So I did appreciate the fact that we gave them that ear, that voice. I do hope that if this passes out of committee today, there will still be some ongoing discussions, as you said, Representative Paschal, about this. My main concern in this is not necessarily making the changes. It's the lack of communication and a lot of misunderstanding. And we don't want anything to our military veterans to make them feel like they're not at the top of the list. And so regardless of what we do today, I just wanted to say that. I do appreciate all the work. I didn't know, I knew y'all did some work with the governor, that kind of thing. Appreciate all that. I know we made some changes. But veterans are at the top of the list. And I know that's got to be our main priority.
I want to say thank you for your service.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Any more discussion? I heard you say you wanted to,
Yeah, make a motion.
motion, okay. All in favor?
The second.
We didn't have to have one, but I appreciate the
Yeah,
second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
All right, favorable passage. And with that said, we make commitments that we will continue to negotiate as we go forward. So, I look forward to doing that, and over the next week or two or three or four, let's see what we can work out. Next bill, House Bill 295, Alden.
She's not here, but I can
Come right ahead.
talk about it if you don't mind.
Oh, and let me interrupt just for a second. Before everybody leaves, we are gonna have a program today that I think is gonna be fun from Alabama Archives and History. So we're gonna wrap this up here pretty quick, and I think it will be a nice, short program that you will enjoy very much. And I would thank the Archives Director for being here as well.
Mr. Chairman, could I introduce, do a quick introduction?
I think you should.
And then I have someone speak.
Okay.
Members, HB 285, this is almost, I'm gonna call it a cleanup bill from last year. We had some, had legislation dealing with our UCMJ in the military. And so, President Arnold, she's bringing this bill back to revise and, provide for the ranks of members that may take legislation. So UCMJ in the military just from the justice side. And I'd like to turn it over to our, liaison, Stephen Morris. If you introduce yourself and let us know who you're with.
I will do it. I'm Stephen Morris. I'm represent technically the state military department. Underneath the state military department is the Alabama National Guard. So Chairman, we thank you all so much for letting me do this. This is some technical changes, but also one little change that I want to kind of bring to your attention. This is from Act 24-329 last year of our military or Code of Military Justice. There were some changes that needed to be made last year. They were all done, but you can see after you pass the bill, you kind of feel like realize that you should have added one or two more things. One of those is to take down. It was very general last year. They kept it at the brigade level for the justice to be handed down. Now they want to make that the brigade or the battalion level. In the flow of command, it makes it a little bit better to take it down to the battalion level, smaller group. Everybody knows who those people will be. They can adjudicate this a lot better than on the brigade level where you're talking colonels and generals, what have you. So that's one of the changes. The other changes are really combining some section lines, taking it, one of them says, on one line, it mentioned an E6 and below for a diminishing pay grade, and the next line said E7 through E9. So instead of having two lines that basically say the same thing, they just wanted to change it to E9 and below. And so that's one of the other changes. If you look at the third bullet point under section 6, they did add a reduction of up to 2 pay grades of an enlisted member who is an E6 and below. That is one of the changes they meant to put in the ACMJ last year and didn't do. And beyond that, if you have any questions, I'm not a military person, but I hopefully know this is good enough to answer all of your questions. And if you've got any, I'd love to try to answer.
Any questions? All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Favorable report. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Bill 104.
All right. And do we have,
Well, I could take that one and then we can bring up, Jake to elaborate on it.
that'd be fine.
Okay, members of Senate Bill 104, this bill, is just simply to codify our current functions for the Alabama Military Stability Commission to codify that the chairman of the House and Senate Committee will be part of the commission. They already attended meetings, it's just to codify that into law. But this time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask our executive director of our commission, the foundation, to elaborate.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty straightforward. Basically, we're just codifying that, you know, Chairman Oliver's already on the committees, Senator Jones is not. It's really not about them specifically, it's about making sure that the chairman of those committees and perpetuity members of our commission, they're already at the table with us. Which just makes it more official and brings them fully into the fold.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, favorable report. All right, thank you all very much. And at this time, I would like to invite Steve Burry to come up. And if anybody has to leave, there's something you got going on, I understand. But I really would appreciate it if you listen to Director Burry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I appreciate the chance to speak to the committee about a really exciting project we have underway at the Department of Archives and History. We're making several updates to our permanent exhibits in the Museum of Alabama on the second floor. And I want to talk to you specifically about one today in our military gallery. Little rewind, first of all, going all the way back to the beginning, from 1901. The very first State History Museum in Alabama was actually unrolled in the House and Senate chambers across the street when the legislature was not in session. Y'all met only once per quadrennium back then, so the public could actually come to those rooms, surround themselves with these great materials from our collections.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes, sir.
Would y'all like to pull the chairs up so you can see this?
Yeah, maybe we turn it this way.
Or turn that screen, there you go. Just everybody get in a spot where you can see.
See, Bill?
I'm sorry.
No, thank you.
All right, we squared away? Continue.
1907, the south wing of the Capitol was built, and we moved into a room that's still called the Old Archives Room. It's currently another legislative committee room over there. And that was our home until 1939. At the end of World War I, the archives director was charged with chairing the state's World War I commission. And its responsibility was to document the service of Alabamians in that first global conflict. And we started building phenomenal collections there. And along with that, the archives conceptualized a building that would serve as both a standalone home for the archives and the state's World War Memorial Home. And this is an early rendering of that building. It was never constructed quite that way. Tom Owen died about a year later trying to raise money. The state had very few resources at the end of World War I. Cotton prices were in the basement. The economy was in tough shape. So this didn't happen. But 20 years later, under the leadership of his widow, Marie Bankhead Owen, the state was able to complete the original portion of what's our home today. So this opened in 1940 and then was expanded most recently in 2005. And when we did that, that's when we opened Alabama Voices, our big centerpiece exhibition that's really a fantastic Smithsonian quality exhibit. So what we're doing now is going back into the original building and bringing other spaces up to the quality that we created in Alabama Voices 11 years ago. So Alabama Voices on the left end there, we're doing some technology updates and some other content updates there. These other galleries, we're introducing a whole new children's gallery, the military gallery I'm about to tell you about, and we're reworking our Native American content as part of this project. This is the way the military gallery looked in 1940 when the building opened, and until a couple of months ago, this is the way the military gallery looked. And in the last several years, we've had a phenomenal World War I collection going back to that collecting emphasis that started in 1918 and 19. And this has served us really well over time. But we want to be able to tell more stories and to rotate more collections through our for our visitors and like I said, to elevate that to the quality of Alabama Voices. So these cases have been empty. The cases are this week in the process of being dismantled, and I'm very happy to say they're going to have continued service at the USS Alabama, Marion Military Institute, and the Hall of Heroes in Talladega. So we found new homes for these cases to continue to tell the story of Alabama's military history. This is an overhead view of that room, and I'm going to kind of walk you around this space and tell you what we're going to try to do. As you walk in from the hallway, this is going to be the main intro wall here. We're going to introduce the purpose of the gallery, the main themes that we're going to use. The collections and stories are going to change in here over time, but we're going to always work with three main themes that we developed in conjunction with our military advisory group. We had both retirees and active duty officers and enlisted personnel working with us to develop these themes and the whole concept for the gallery. And I'll introduce those to you here in a second. We walk in, there'll be some audiovisual components. We've interviewed 10 veterans. Those are being edited and produced into a film that's going to be a really great setting the tone for the whole experience. The idea here is to talk about the vast range of Alabama's military stories that are about service of people in uniform, but also their families, the extended communities that also sacrifice to support them in their service. We're going to talk about the communities that support that work, what happens in our military installations around the state, defense industry sectors and companies in Alabama that contribute to that, and then a special emphasis on veterans and the contributions that they make to their communities. In the center, we'll look at this map a little bit more closely here. So that right in the middle of that wall, this is a collage of images of Alabamians from all different periods in history who have served. And this is serving as a backdrop, really underscoring the idea that this is a story about a lot of different people over a long period of time who've made their contributions. The map itself is actually being made from the original pieces of the original teak deck of the USS Alabama. I'm sure you all know that that deck was replaced in recent years, and they were generous in providing us with pieces of that original World War II deck that's being crafted into the shape of the Alabama here. So visually trying to tie together both the physical artifact of service and these visual reminders of the experience and the contributions of so many people. This is the general purpose of the gallery. Alabamians hold deep connections to the military, sometimes spanning generations in a family. They include service in both combat and support roles abroad and close to home. Reminders of the state's military ties can be found in historic battlefields, modern bases, and memorials. Alabama continues to be defined in part by the military presence in the state. Documenting Alabamian service is a foundational part of the mission of the Department of Archives and History. In 1940, the building in which you stand was dedicated as Alabama's World War Memorial and the home of the archives. In that tradition, we are going to continue to talk about these three themes. This is what our advisory team helped us to develop. That service requires individuals to place a greater cause ahead of their own interests, often at great risk or in the face of adversity. Community, people who combine their efforts in a shared purpose, whether in uniform or as civilians, develop strong and lasting bonds. And legacy, through the ongoing contributions of veterans and the memorialization of valor and sacrifice, service has meaning far beyond the end of active duty. And those are going to be the constants. Whenever we introduce these new collections and new stories, they're all going to kind of be interpreted through these core themes. So walking around the room, I'm just going to give you a flavor of this quickly. This is the east wall as you walk into the room. This first case on the right with this multicolored quilt here is going to tell the story of a single family. This is Jake and Ludi Carr from Walker and Marion counties. Married right out of high school. He went into the Navy. She went out to California with him. This is her factory worker's badge pass here at the bottom left. So she was a Rosie the Riveter who went with her husband out to California while he was in the Navy in the Pacific and worked to support the war effort. This on the right are Ludi and his grandmother and aunt who crafted this quilt documenting Jake's entire service in the Navy during World War II. From the time he entered, in several battles and engagements he was part of, and even including a ship almost sinking, and then the USS Minneapolis until eventually he was discharged in 1945. This great artifact that tells the story of a family and their contributions during the wartime. Moving to the left, the first big case is initially going to be focused on Army aviation during the Vietnam era. We've got several great pieces that have come into us here, including on loan from Fort Novosel is the uniform shirt and Medal of Honor Chief Warrant Officer Michael Novosel, and I know you know his extraordinary story. That photograph is training at Fort McClellan in 1967. This is Freddie Ward of Geneva County. He was in Vietnam from 69 to 70. He's in the center in the photograph. Was an OB-1 Mohawk pilot. After he left active duty, came back and served in the flew helicopters for the National Guard for 20 years. Then became a high school history and science teacher, junior high school here in Montgomery. And again, a great representation of what veterans do coming back into their communities. Great collection that he's donated to us. Jerry Hatfield, many of you know Mr. Hatfield, who was native to Patmore and served in the 121st Assault Helicopter Company. He was shot through his helicopter, wound up on a Navy hospital ship recuperating. That's the road he was given while he was on that Navy ship recuperating. He gave us this fantastic helmet, and Jerry's in the middle of that photograph, second from the left. Great story. You know, he came back and became the first helicopter pilot for DPS when its aviation program was founded, and he is now a part-time employee at the archives. Moving on to the next wall, this is going to be about legacy. How do we memorialize the service of people? And this is going to talk about kind of going clockwise here, a 9/11 prayer vigil in Huntsville from 2001. The top right is the memorial to Julius Ellsbury in Kelly Ingram Park in Birmingham. He was the first black Alabamian killed in World War II, died on the USS Oklahoma in Pearl Harbor. That's the dedication of a Korean War memorial in Mobile, bottom right, and then the dedication of the USS Alabama after its restoration in 1965 down in Mobile. We're also going to talk about how military personnel themselves document and memorialize what they are seeing and what they are experiencing in combat. On the left here is this great image by an artist named Nathan Glick, and he's recording his view from inside a B-24 Liberator in Europe. Mr. Glick went on to become one of the best-known combat artists from World War II, Birmingham native. And then on the right here is this really moving sketch by Lance Corporal James Adams, who's in the 1st Marine Division in Vietnam. We've got a Gadsden Highway Memorial here. This is a Alabama Honor Flight participant, Don Hammock from Tuscaloosa. So this whole wall is talking about how do we remember, how do we participate in those conversations to memorialize Alabama. On the next wall, other big cases here with artifacts that tells great stories. The one on the right is what we're kind of informally calling the Mercy Bringers. This is about the chaplaincy and the medical services who bring and life-preserving care, physical and spiritual, to service members who are in these really terrible, difficult situations. Some great pieces here. This is William Jesse Tarver of Anniston. He was in the 167th in World War I. He was wounded in July of 1918 and died in Fort Pearson, Georgia when he got home, never fully recovered from his wounds. The microscope belonged to an Alabamian named John Alexander Lanford, who was a medical pathologist based in France and base hospital during World War I. Those are nurses at Camp Sheridan right here in Montgomery, providing critical care to troops stationed here. And that's the uniform, the medical uniform of Roy Lynn, an Alabama Army medic who was here at Camp Sheridan in World War I. But we're going to tell more recent histories too. On the left here is a nurse, Raven Christopher from Mobile, who was deployed to Kosovo, and that's her uniform in the center. And then we've got members of the Chemical, Biological, Radiological, and Nuclear Unit. This is at a Mobile nursing home during the COVID-19 pandemic. Great chaplaincy material. This field organ was owned by Jefferson County native Roy Jean Bartlett, who served on the USS Impeccable in the Pacific Theater. They carried these organs with them wherever they went, including the battlefield. A great Vietnam-era chaplain service in this photograph, and at the right are a collection recently donated by Lieutenant Colonel Scott Kennis from Roanoke, who was deployed during Operation Iraqi Freedom. He's currently stationed at Fort Novosel. And continuing that theme of service, we're just talking about these experiences that people, we have records of through photographs and letters and diaries. On the left is the crew and the mascot. Look at the dog right in the center of the USS Binion. That was a photograph taken by Charles Greer from Lamar County, Alabama. And on the right is an Alabamian, Corporal Jack Cotton, providing care to a national, he's from Mountain Brook, providing medical care. Family service is a family tradition. This is General Gary Cooper from Mobile and his daughter Shawn on the day of her commissioning, and the Marines, and that's a photograph of Coast Guard Station Mobile radio operators there, Michelle Fortin and Marisa Martinez. We've also brought in great artistic representations of memorialization. This beautiful piece called Service Before Self was actually made by an incarcerated Alabamian named Robert Terry Malden Jr. and dedicated to Sergeant Troy David Jenkins, who's a native of Evergreen. He died on April 24th, 2003, 5 days after he took an unexploded cluster bomb from an Iraqi child. Great piece that is going to be featured there. Right in the middle of the room, that intro wall that we talked about is 4.01. Behind it, 4.06, is going to be this extraordinary case with artifacts and these great flags. On the left, the big banner behind it is going to be this view of the members of the 167th on their way home in 1919. On the right is Lieutenant Cleve Abbott of the 366th Infantry. He's coming home on the SS Aquitania. Many of you recognize his name. You might recognize Lieutenant Abbott. He comes home, becomes a much beloved coach and athletics director at Tuskegee, the football stadium at Tuskegee is named. In that case, between those are the national colors of the 167th and the regimental flag of the 366. Those are both at a conservator right now, being treated and conserved, and they'll be back in time for the exhibit opening. And then our last wall is going to talk about veterans and the many roles that they play in our communities. Starting on the left end down here, this case dedicated to the story of George Washington Hall from Greene County. Mr. Hall served in the Army in Vietnam, came home, continued to serve for many years in the Army Reserves until he retired as a Master Sergeant. He then served in the Utah Police Department as an Alabama State Trooper and as the Sheriff of Greene County. And we're calling this exhibit The Many Hats of George Hall, because these hats represent all the different roles that he fulfilled in his service to his community and to his state. So in addition to those military and law enforcement roles, this is a fez that he wore as a member of the King Solomon Masonic Lodge, and he was a small business owner. He farmed and he owned Hall's Homemade Syrup over in Bowlagee, Alabama. Rest of this wall, again, more great stories of veterans. These are the Mobile VFW members. VFW members raising funds for Desert Storm veterans. Sometimes, veterans come back with scars and wounds, but they go on to do great things, including becoming elected governor of the state of Alabama. William C. Oates, who lost his arm in the Civil War, comes back and serves the state. At the right, service members are parts of families. This is Sarah White of Mobile being reunited the day she gets home with her sons, Stephen and Brandon, after Operation Desert Storm in Mobile. This is Charles Ellis, who piloted Grumman Avengers during the Guadalcanal campaign. Many of you will recognize Red Irwin, who received the Medal of Honor for picking up a burning phosphorus shell from the belly of a bomber and throwing it out hatch, saving the entire crew of the plane. And this is Operation Iron Rut from last year. Great program of student veterans who are raising funds and awareness for veteran suicide prevention. You all know Benny Atkins. This is the first residence of the new Benny Atkins State Veterans Home and Enterprise, and Sergeant Major Atkins receiving his Medal of Honor. And you probably know he created a foundation to provide college scholarships for non-commissioned Special Forces officers, or non-commissioned Special Forces personnel coming back to help them transition to civilian life. And finally here, talking about wounds. Sometimes they're visible, sometimes they're invisible. These are the shoes. This is a prosthetic shoe worn by Albert Patterson. you all know that name and the work that he did in Phoenix City, cleaning that up, and he was assassinated for it in 1954 after he won the primary for Attorney General. You may not have known that he was severely injured in World War I. And for the rest of his life, wore this prosthetic shoe that helps him to carry on his daily life and all the work that he did. And then on the right, this such an important campaign, the Alabama's Challenge Suicide Prevention Campaign and the Great Billboard Visible on I-65. So these are just to give you kind of a high-level view of the kinds of materials and artifacts and images that we're going to talk about in here. It's not a huge space, but remember that we're going to be rotating these through on a regular basis. We've already got ideas working for future stories that are going to include the 80th anniversary of the Air Force coming up. We're working with someone now on Coast Guard history in Alabama. We just got a great collection from the Ingalls Shipbuilding Factory and shipyards in Decatur here from World War II. And we've got National Guard material and stories to keep us occupied for a long, long time. We hope that you will plan to be with us. This is our schedule. We're going to close the second floor of the archives as soon as our school tour season ends in May. We'll have about 4 months of construction, soft opening in early October. November 6th is the Thursday before Veterans Day. You all have so many commitments on Veterans Day, we knew we couldn't try to compete with that. So we're going to do it the week before. Great way to lead in to the Veterans Day weekend. And we hope we'll have more details on that coming up, and be sure you know about it. I hope you'll be there to celebrate with us as we dedicate that. So again, I appreciate the committee's time, Mr. Chairman, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. As we continue to try to make Alabama the most military-friendly state, this is just one more feather in our cap. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. Appreciate the support. As I said, this is legislative appropriations and private contributions both make this possible. So thank you.
Subject to any questions, we're adjourned.
Good, man, you?
Right now.